Welcome to the School for Ecocentric Evolution and Design Strategies. I'm Hayden.
And I'm Alia.
We're coming to you today from the beautiful greenhouse here at the Turtle Lake Community Farm, where we live outside of Durango, Colorado. We wanted to take this moment to give another Seeds dispatch. We gave our first one a couple weeks ago and thought we'd check in and share from a more personal place this time around of what our life looks like on a daily basis, what we're leaning into, what we're making sense of, so that you can come to know us and hopefully we can come to know you more as we move through this collective journey towards hopefully transitioning from the world we've been in, sort of egocentric world, towards a more ecocentric world of new possibilities and collaboration and mutual relationship.
So I think we just want to also start by naming that we recognize that our experience in this moment is very different than a lot of people's experience with this global pandemic that we're all experiencing in different ways. We really send our love and prayers and blessings and hope for health and vitality and strength for those who are being impacted by this, especially in urban spaces, in a way that we're not at this point in the place where we live. And because of that difference in experience, we also do want to share about what life feels like in a more remote, smaller town, and being a member of a community and living on a farm and getting to spend a lot of our time starting to grow food, really actually laying the foundations of our farm for what we hope will be a really productive growing season this year.
Absolutely. The sort of external pressure of the coronavirus has really sped things along in our personal lives and also for this community to set some new goals of let's strive to become food sovereign here. If we are feeling like we can't rely on the food structures of our current society, and if we look around, that seems to be obvious. I mean, the coronavirus isn't putting necessarily as much pressure, but when we go to the stores, we see a lot of shelf space that's been totally cleared. Because when circumstances like this happen, we go and potentially hoard food from the grocery store, and we're dependent on that middleman between the farmer and us. And it's dependent on this vast network of transportation and labor. And if you dive into the agricultural systems and where the rabbit hole that leads you down, we can clearly see that the instability in those structures. And so that's being revealed within this community, and I think a lot of places, on the need to really move towards more sovereignty in general.
Right.
And we see that a foundation of sovereignty is food sovereignty. So we've been putting a lot of time and effort into cultivating the land here and in early spring and really getting it ready to start producing a lot of food.
Yeah. It's really interesting to be in this moment of collective crisis and to see these ways that this crisis has actually opened the door to a lot of opportunity. And I feel like by revealing some of the fragility of the agricultural system, it's almost been this push for me and you and the community here to be let's really do this. Let's really put a lot of human hours into building this so that we can feel more self-reliant, so we can feel like we know where our food comes from, and not only we know where it comes from, but we're actually eating this place. We're eating the soils and the nutrients and even wild herbs and plants of this particular bioregion, so that we can come to feel more connected to this place as well and be more of a part of the web of life of this particular place.
Absolutely. And I think that this is it can be a biological experience for a human being to feel a sense of relaxation and a sense of coming into place and belonging and safety and security when we're having our hands on the food or the process of growing food or gathering that food from wild places within our local bioregion. There's a sense of empowerment because this is ancient. This is where we come from. We come from a place in which we were we were eating from the landscape that we lived, whether we were cultivating that or gathering that or hunting the food. We had a real intimate relationship with that food, which we knew as our security.
Right.
You know, and we built our societies and our structures and our cultures around the security of that food as the keystone. You know, so part of our Seed's vision is designing and bringing more local sovereign food systems back into this society. It's like awakening us to what is possible in growing food in community, but not just in community. How does this community link with another community nearby? Or how does this homestead link with that homestead? And how can we start sharing resources and really coming to know our community and our neighbors and our friends in a way in which become mutually dependent on each other, not in a limiting sense, but in a liberating sense of that if anything were to happen, we know that we're already in an exchange network. We're already creating resiliency in our community at the foundational earth-based level of like we can feed ourselves. And from that place, I think we have real power.
Definitely, yes. And it's been really cool to see that happening here, really proliferating. There's about 15 kind of community members in this place. And even so, we've seen so many more of those members feeling very interested and excited in this collective pause to get out and to be a part of what's happening on the farm. And then more recently, we've seen neighbors coming by who are really interested in what's going on and are curious how they can also be involved and part of it and learn about what's happening here, just because they walk by or they drive by and they see that real difference is being made on this landscape in this particular farm. Like things are coming into form, beds are being laid and prepped and ready for the spring season, and it's exciting. There's something so ancient, like you're speaking to, in the human being, that it feels a deep connection to food, either if that's gathering or if it's cultivating. And when we see these kind of base foundational layers being set, we're like, whoa, that's important. I want to know what you're doing to sort of help provide for yourselves, and I want to also be connected to you because I know on some deep level that makes me safer and that makes me more resourced as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's something about seeing a place preparing itself to grow food, you know, through human hands, and like, whoa, like look at that market garden, or wow, look at those mulched trees. There's something like, I think, ancient about it that speaks to possibility of like, whoa, in the future this is going to be providing abundance. Where if I go into the grocery store, if I go into town right now, I feel like constricted, you know. There's like, it's intense out there, and that's an experience we're all experiencing, and it's like, can I even trust this? Like, could this close down at any second? And then where would I get food? And so every day that this place has been moving towards growing food, I mean, we're sitting in a greenhouse right now that is full of greens that are already ready to be harvested. And so there's a sense of like ease that's moving in, even though there's this collective chaos. And you don't have to live in a community farm or have a greenhouse to be able to start growing your own food in just simple ways. And you know, we can just start in our backyards if we live in urban spaces. If we live in apartment spaces, we can seek out open plots of land. There are so many beautiful examples where community members took initiative, and there was sort of a rundown old vacant lot and turned it into a community garden. There's several of them in New York City. There's several of them in LA. They're everywhere in major city spaces if we get creative. You know, down the street there's a sign that just came up that said free community garden space. You know, someone's just offering that. And I think at this moment in time, more people than not may be willing to open up their spaces that they may not be using to provide food for the community. So it's really up to us as individuals to get as creative as we can to move and shift things in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. So in addition to food and food sovereignty, I'm curious what other like personal or communal practices you've seen us be moving towards in this time of collective pause and reflection towards kind of the way that we want to be living
Right.
moving forward.
Well, I think with this pressure and like more people getting involved on a daily basis, and the farm really sort of creating a vision for itself of like, oh, we want to do this. There's then like, how do we do that, right? How can we trust each other? How can we lean in? How can we know what the group norms are? How do we participate on the farm without stepping on people's toes? Because there's different levels of skill set and engagement and knowledge. And so how can we incentivize participation, and how can we make people feel safe? How can we allow people's voices to be heard? And so we've been in this process of working with creating group norms and core concepts, and Katrina, who is sort of founded Turtle Lake Refuge and is just an amazing visionary leader of this place, had already created a list of core concepts, and it was just like, let's bring these core concepts to the forefront, let's understand them each particularly, let's all vote on them collectively so that we're all agreeing to what these core concepts are, and now we can feel like we're a synergized whole with individuals in that, and we all agree on certain core concepts that are going to allow us to live in better relationship. And so these core practices we've been engaging in, which is council practice, which is simply a circle practice where you sit in a circle and each one gets to express or answer a question in their own unique way and share their voice at their own unique time, so we can see each person and listen deeply to each person. And we did this to ratify our 8 core concepts, and since then have gathered in different ways to organize this community and build more structure and shared understanding and shared language, which I think is just leading towards more group participation and more excitement of like, oh, I can actually trust this and I can lean in because we're starting to have a shared language. And just one last thing here on this is like, I really believe that we have so much visionary potential and so much imagination and possibilities that are emerging within the collective consciousness through individuals. Yet what's being asked of us is collaboration. And especially at this time, it can seem really overwhelming or difficult to collaborate. And so I feel like this is a ripe time for trying to build trust. And I see that we build trust through shared language and communication. I listened to you and I heard what you said, and I'm going to express myself, and now you see me. And the more that we can see each other and listen and share in real intentional ways, the more trust can be built, and the more we can collaborate to bring those visions out of us and put them into form.
Yes, beautifully said. It's again like such an ancient practice, just like the food and our humans' relationship with cultivating and harvesting food is an ancient practice. So too what we're talking about are these ancient practices, like across time and culture. Humans would sit in circle to hear and listen and to receive each other. This is how decisions were made. This is how collective visioning was done, to think of a more beautiful form that the community could move towards. This is how harm was repaired in terms of restorative justice circles, which is something that we do here as well. And so coming back to these very ancient practices that live in our bones and in our ancient memories feels like the foundational work of what we're going to need to build this more beautiful world.
Exactly. And starting here, it's like, so I heard some of the community members talking about like, wow, like if this works, like what we're doing feels like it's doing something and people are noticing. And if this works, if we can collectively do this, like, how many neighbors are going to notice? Or is the town of Durango going to notice? And like, and if they notice, like, what then? Like, can these be translated out? And that's really part of our work at Seeds, is like encapsulating core practices that allow us to move towards trust and relationship building and expression from an individual and a collective level to move towards a better world, which we've called like an ecocentric world, like an ecocentric world view as it lives through each of us.
Right. And that idea of ecocentrism really simply just meaning an honoring of the inherent worth of all life across different forms. And so to be able to move collectively towards a worldview where we honor and the sacredness and we celebrate the rightful place of all forms of life within the ecosystems, even of ourselves, all of the different parts of ourselves that are welcome there, within partnerships, within families, within communities, and then within the more than human world community. So moving in that direction starts with these basic foundational practices and principles that will be the solid foundation that we need to make this drastic transition that we are being asked to make from an industrial growth, egocentric worldview to a life-sustaining, ecocentric worldview.
And I would just add to that an ecocentric perspective is basically stepping into the web of life and understanding that we're just a piece in this very intricate web of life, and we're actually held up by this web. You know, the web isn't held up by us, which is like sort of this egocentric perspective of that this world is for us to utilize as we will for our own needs and desires. And those desires being limited to ourselves or our nation, but that actually we are born out of this web of life, and our lives flourish when that web of life flourishes. The human and non-human other, when all components of the system are harmonizing and expressing their individuality in a way that benefits the whole, then we each individually benefit. And so how can we shift towards that perspective in a world that we see today, you know, and we think that this coronavirus may be providing an opportunity to actually see that we're interconnected, to see that we have impact, to see that things move across this planet really quickly, and we should work together.
Yes, and to give us a collective pause that we've really been needing in order to reflect on how we have been living, both personally and collectively, and to really assess, is that how we most want to keep living moving forward? Or are there ways that we're ready and willing to make some changes in order to reorient towards what truly matters and what truly will be the foundation that can help create life and habitable life on this planet for future generations to come?
Exactly. And there's many scales in which we each can start working on this. You know, if we're feeling empowered and it's like, yes, I want to learn how to grow a garden, like that is an amazing practice that can have profound effects, you know, for your own life, for your own health, and for your communities. There's also this time, like there's a reason why we're sitting in a greenhouse right now, and it's not just because there's greenery behind us. It's because some of these ideas, these shifts in perspective to where it's like, okay, we're taking a pause from our daily routines, we're taking a pause from our habits, we're having this opportunity to look at ourselves and maybe look into the future and feel into what possibilities there are. And what we're suggesting is that we have the possibility to co-create that future together. And so maybe it's not quite time yet to go out and start planting all these seeds in our communities and in our cities, but maybe we can create safe spaces for ourselves in our own homes to start challenging our belief structures. Like, why do I think I need that? You know, or maybe we can shift perspective a little bit. Maybe it's time we let go of all the material needs that we think we have and start valuing how healthy the ecosystem is, you know, and like maybe just starting to shift those perspectives in a safe container, in a greenhouse where things can be planted when it's still winter outside. It is still too cold for the outside world to take this up fully, and we understand that, like in a lot of ways it is, but we can start creating those safe spaces, those safe hubs for ourselves to start planting seeds of a new way of being and start growing and nurturing those. So at one point maybe they're ready to be transplanted to the outer world, or maybe they're ready to be eaten by ourselves so that we can start to fully metabolize and embody new ways of seeing the world and new possibilities with ourselves and others.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you who are in quarantine right now or locked down, this is a real time of the greenhouse moment. Like, what is it that you are sprouting in yourself or the ideas or the practices that you're kind of letting grow but are still a little fragile and tender, and they need that extra containment and support, and being gentle with yourself in that process, and letting these changes take a little bit of root and be given the nutrients they need to flourish over time, and being a part of this collective story that we're writing together.
So hopefully we can help each other sprout those seeds and cultivate that food of the future that can be nourishing for ourselves and for the ecosystem and each other. So thank you so much for joining us in this journey. There'll be a lot more videos coming your way as well, as far as practices and different ways that you can engage with what we're leaning into, and also hopefully how we can engage with what you're leaning into, and we can really help each other in this collective transition.
Grow and prosper. Be well.